Welcome to today's webinar with the Small Business Administration. I'm Joyce Barrett with Heritage Ohio. Our mission is helping people to save the places that matter, build community, live better. Webinars are made possible by the generosity and support of our membership. I want to thank the Small Business Administration for setting up this webinar in a very busy time for them. Today's presenter is Joshua Stutzman. He is the SBA's Cincinnati branch manager. Before moving back to Ohio a year ago, Joshua served the U.S. Small Business Administration's South Florida district office. He has over 9 years of federal government service, including the Department of Defense at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. Prior to his federal civilian service, Joshua worked in the business sales field and office management for over 12 years. Joshua served over 17 total years of service in the U.S. Army and has transitioned into the Army Reserves. In his current role at the SBA, Joshua manages the strategic efforts and daily operations of SBA's activities in the counties within the surrounding the Cincinnati metropolitan area. The office is a branch of SBA's Columbus district. Joshua Stutzman is a native Cincinnati. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Cincinnati and received a master's of business administration degree from Thomas More College in Northern Kentucky. Today's presentation is going to be in 3 parts. First, a description of the disaster loan program. Next, a tutorial about how to apply for the program. And then we'll have question and answer session. You're able at the end to type into the comment box, and then we'll read those questions. So we are ready to hand it over to you, Joshua.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Joyce, for that nice introduction and hosting this today. I hope everyone can hear me clearly on the call. As Joyce mentioned, my name is Joshua Stutzman with the Cincinnati branch of the SBA office. Today's presentation was set up to be able to spread information that has yet not gotten to the masses on the economic injury disaster loans currently being offered by the SBA. What we would like to do is provide an overview, and I will actually do an overview with you and then look at some snapshots of what the application looks like from the live screen. When you actually go in to apply to the loan application, there have been questions that come up that we would like to go ahead and answer and give some feedback on now for those that are still applying, those that haven't applied yet, and those that are recommending friends, family members, other business colleagues, or anything of that nature. So without further ado, I'd like to start an overview, as you can see from the slideshow, what businesses are eligible to apply. One of the big things is obviously this is for small businesses, but also nonprofits can apply too. Small agricultural cooperatives, small aquaculture businesses, and most private nonprofit organizations. You must be directly affected by the disaster and located in the disaster area. When we actually get to the live site where our slides show snapshots of the live application site, I will show you how you can go in and see what counties are added, and you can double check that your county is on there. As of last Friday, Ohio was added in almost every single county that should be in this system. I will show you how to check that as well. If we move on to the next slide, how much can I borrow? The big question is, what are the amounts? Up to $2 million, and then that is at a set percentage fixed rate of 3.75% interest for small businesses. Nonprofits, your interest rate on that loan amount will be 2.75% for nonprofits. Now, you don't just go in and say, I would like the full $2 million. When you fill out the information, and we'll talk about this during the application, they look at the small business's ability to repay based on a time horizon, and also what costs that you do have. Remember, this is going to be a working capital loan, so they look at what your expenses are and what you need in this time horizon. As we know, we don't have a definitive time horizon to say this is going to only last 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months. So they look at what your costs are and over time what you would need to keep your business afloat, keep making payrolls and expenses such as your lease payments and any property related to your business to keep it afloat. And by property, I mean if you are leasing a building or if you're a restaurant owner and you have overhead on your service fees, they do look at that information that will be spelled out in the application. How can I use the loan funds? Fixed debit payments, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills. As I talked about, your debt payments and payroll. So what is your monthly cost as a business owner to keep the business going during these times of uncertainty? That's what they're looking about, and as well as those other bills associated with the business, not your personal bills, the business bills, as well as everything that you have coming in. As we move on to the next slide, I'd like to talk about the collateral requirements, and the real estate is preferred on loans over $25,000. Now, one of the big things to know is up to $25,000, you do not have to secure collateral. However, collateral is not a reason for decline. What they look to do is if your business has other means of collateral, and say, for example, if you don't own a home to put down as collateral, they can actually use any major equipment that you may have related to the business, heavy equipment, to secure whatever means of collateral are necessary to secure that loan. So the basic filing requirements, there will be an application, Form 5 or 5C, and when we get to the next presentation slide deck, I'll actually show you the differences of which form applies to what type of business. The IRS 4506T for the applicant, principals, and affiliates, and then the business federal income tax return. Obviously, some businesses have not filed for 2019 yet. That is not a problem. You need to submit 2018 taxes as well, but also if you have a current personal financial statement and your current P&L, your profit and loss statement, as current as possible. And a schedule of liabilities, which can be filled out on SBA Form 2202. Other information that may be requested is personal tax returns for all principals and end-of-year financial statements. As mentioned previously, the current P&L statement, your interim P&L statement for this year thus far, and the SBA Form 1368 for your monthly sales. Some of the ineligible entities that I want to point out are farms, religious organizations, gambling concerns, casinos, racetracks, some other things that aren't on there, real estate developers, lobbyists, and the concerns that have credit available elsewhere. So how do we apply? That is some of the general information of what the EIDL loan is. But to apply, you actually, that live link that takes you to disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA will take you to the application. Paper applications are available on the link provided on that slide, however, are not recommended because of the time. You do still have to mail those in, and that cannot be as fast as live applications online most of the time. So it is recommended to fill these out online, and it can be more accurate because remember, on an online application, there can be error messages that come up that don't allow you to move forward if all areas are not filled out completely. On a paper application, you do not have that ability. So if you miss something, it may not be caught until it gets to the processing center. One of the big things that I want to point out at the bottom of the slide, please, if you can, jot this number down, the 1-800-659-2955. Again, that's 1-800-659-2955 if anyone's having trouble viewing the slides or just called in. And then also disaster customer service at SBA.gov. For the customer service, if there are any things that you are experiencing with the application or have a question for the customer service, please, once you start the application, jot down your application number so you can reference that anytime that you would send an email in for follow-up or to call the customer service center. Please have your application. Once you start your application, on the top of some of the pages, it will actually reference that application number in case you didn't write it down at the beginning. So submitting a complete application is the best way to help relieve some of the delays that could happen. Now, one of the things that I said earlier about filling out a paper application is someone may not catch it until they start processing. That's more time until you can get the approval on your loan. So you want to make sure your application is complete. Go over it a second time if necessary and make sure you've included all information they're asking for, but did any uploads or sent the information to the proper box for your tax returns or other documentation required. So the portal, the DLAP portal or Disaster Loan Application Portal, this is what the main splash page looks like. As you can see in the big blue circle in the middle, it says double click online. That's to start an online application. But to the left, you see a red circle that says eligible disaster areas. This is the portion that I mentioned earlier where you can actually go in and make sure your specific county has been added to the list. Like I said, on Friday, most of them had been added, but you can always double check for your listed disaster area and its eligibility by clicking on that red circle, and it'll actually bring up the counties that have been uploaded. On the right-hand side of this screen, you'll see a green circle is where you can check application status. This is another time, always have your loan number available, whether you're checking application, calling into the 1-800 number, or sending an email. It's always good to store the application. And when you're creating your account, please pick a password you can remember and also questions in case the password has to be reset that are easy to remember. Actually talks about this on this page about registering online. You have to register first once you click register online. And then you want to make sure that you have a good email address and cell phone. We've come across a couple issues so far where someone will have one and not the other. So please make sure you also have a solid email address in there that we can contact you, as well as a phone number, because if they do find an issue or a question with your application and someone in the processing center needs to get a hold of you, this is where they draw that information from on that user registration. So on the end of the overview, I want to provide two resources here, the Columbus District Office and the Cleveland District Office, depending on what part of Ohio you're calling in from. So take a snapshot of that, save this slide, take a picture with your phone. This is the district office. And before the presentation's over, I'll also make sure my information is given out directly as well. But for the Columbus District Office, we have Dave Townsend, Jerome Jones, Shannon, and Talia all listed here with their email addresses. And then on the next slide, I'd like to go and show you Cleveland District Office point of contacts, Ray, Mark, Tom, and Tim, their direct extensions, as well as their email addresses. So pending any questions on this overview, I'm actually going to close this one down, and I'm going to open the application process. I don't see anybody in the comment section saying they can't see it, so I'm going to switch this over to presentation mode on the second portion of our presentation. Okay, so from here, some of the information, there is some overlap because the overview was to give you more background on the EIDL loan. Obviously, as we spoke about counties being added, this is a message from our administrator, Jovita Carnanza, letting everyone know that upon the request that governors from certain states were going to be able to make a request to the SBA for signature for these loans. That's how the economic injury disaster loan came to be here in Ohio. It went through this process. So some of the basic filing requirements we talked about earlier on the SBA Form 5. We're actually going to go a little more in depth on this part of the presentation to talk about filing requirements, and then I will give you screenshots of the actual live system here so we can go, and then we will have a section at the end for questions. So if you have any questions on a particular slide, please jot it down, and we will open that up for questions here at the end. We talked about most of this earlier, especially the current year to date profit and loss statement. Make sure you have that available. You will need that for filing. And remember, you have to make sure you're applying to the correct loan, the loan that most people should be applying for. It's not for physical damage, it's for economic injury. And that is the type of loan this EIDL loan is for as it relates to COVID-19 and the effect it's having on businesses. All right, going back to how to apply, this is the link. Now, this is where we're going to get a little more in depth and talk about which each of these things go into. So as we talked about completing registration before, we're gonna click on double click to apply online. And then this page is new. This was not on the last presentation deck, but as you can see, you have the option to select the type of business you are. This is very important. You heard me mention a Form 5 and a 5C previously. Well, the Form 5 would be completed by corporations, partnerships, private nonprofit organizations, limited partnerships, trusts, and limited liability entities. The Form 5C can be completed by sole proprietorship. Once you make your selection in the system, it should automatically direct you to the proper form. That's why if you can see my mouse hovering over this, it's very important to make sure you're choosing the correct option for how your business is structured. Pardon me. So after that, you're going to go in and select the state, the county, and the disaster declaration. So you will be applying for the economic injury disaster declaration. So as you can see, you select a state, and then it will have the drop-down list. This is previously where I mentioned you could go in and actually see what counties are in there. Always good to do before you start just to make sure it is pre-populating. But as you can see, later you'll have a section where you have to select the county that your business is in. Completing certifications, you're going to read electronically and agree to certify the truthful submission of the information in this loan application. And the business type, for example, as you can see in the Form 5, we talked about this before. This particular example is an LLC, which applies to Form 5. As we go through, you fill out the information as necessary. This is the major thing that I mentioned earlier about red asterisks. So this will help you identify fields that you cannot move forward without. So it'll actually show in red and not let you move on if you're missing one of these asterisk fields and you can't move on to the next section until they are completed, which helps, again, make sure that you are completing 100% of the application before you can move on to the next page. So from there, Form 5 is also on pages 2 and 3. Note, if a business is a partnership, all members must be listed with percent of ownership until it equals 100% of ownership. So if I am 60% owner and then I have someone that is 40% owner, they also have to be listed on here. As we move on to the next filing requirements, now the application is complete. The filing requirements on this page must be submitted. So it'll actually, as you can see, it says complete the disaster loan, and it has a green check mark. Then it gives you the information for the individuals. As you can see in that next block, it says complete and sign personal financial statements. And then you would go in, as you've listed those names previously, and start that next step. If you indicated you have real estate, you must complete this form. Remember, the computer is smart. Once you actually click on one section, it'll actually send you and populate on your application another section, such as this form that you need to fill out and supply information for. Personal assets and debits, this actually needs to be filled out as well. As you can see, that this is important because, as I mentioned, once you submit your application, you're actually going to get called by someone in a disaster center and a processor to walk through. They look at the total amount of items and expenses that the business owner has on a monthly basis, and then they look at your ability to repay. That is one of the things that they use to kind of get a good time horizon for your payback or your term on this loan. So the schedules of liabilities on SBA Form 2202 are also available online. The applicant would click on the schedule of liabilities and either complete the SBA form, or if you already have a schedule of liabilities, you would upload this at this time. So the uploaded 4506, that can be uploaded once this form is printed and signed. You would need to save a copy on your desktop. Once you save it, you would go and upload it from there. You can also opt to deliver online in the Dropbox, but if you're able to upload it, I do recommend that way. For electronically filing the 4506T, each applicant and partner must fill this out. And as you can see, I don't know, it is a little smaller. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. So right here where you actually see my mouse hovering over, it says disaster loan application number. As I mentioned previously in this presentation, there is that number that you want to make sure you keep safe somewhere and jot down. And that's another example of where you can find your application number. So it'll actually let you know once it's successfully uploaded. You'll receive a message back indicating the transmission was successful and all fields are complete. So moving on to tax returns, to complete your application, you must upload your most recent tax return. Obviously, again, if you don't have 2019 submitted, 2018, and then you're going to have a current P&L statement as well. So this is where you certify of truthful information. It's very important. This is a federal disaster loan, so at no time should you be dishonest in any way. This is a federal loan, so please, please, please make sure you're giving correct information, as you will be asked to sign and certify that all information is truthful. Filing requirements complete. So as you see, there's another green check mark that says disaster business loan application, and then it shows on the next sections which you'll need to start. You can see the filing requirement no longer says start in that area. And it actually, just to go back, it says update under that area, and then the next section will allow you to start that and then go back and update the previous section if needed. Once the application is successfully submitted, you'll get this page and you'll actually see the number 1 where it says apply online message center. You will get a message that confirms submittal of the application. At the main page, insert your username and password to complete the started application. Once in, click continue. And then you have a section for business losses. A sole proprietor will use sole proprietor and EIDL, economic injury disaster loan. Remember, the loans that we're talking about today are all for economic injury. None of these are physical disaster loans. Those are the ones that were popular and most used before this type of occurrence we had with COVID-19. So please make sure that, because they are still an option in there, you are not clicking on disaster for physical damage. You are clicking on the economic injury portion. Going to home and personal losses, the loan application will walk you through the process. Make sure you're hitting save to save the inputted area and click next to navigate through the area. It does say, and remember we were talking sole proprietors, it says home and personal losses. Was their damage to the property your primary residence? Now remember, this is the sole proprietor page. That automatically comes up as this was a previously populated system for those disaster loans prior to COVID-19. So there's the declaration section. On the same line as the save icon, you can also see the progress of the disaster loan. It does let you know, if you can see where my mouse is hovering over and circling right now, it shows you how far along in the application process you are. Now, one thing I do want to highlight here, it actually has what disaster you are clicking for. Make sure you please click the correct one. Can't stress that enough. We've had a couple people start the wrong application for physical damage, disaster damage. Make sure you're doing economic injury for COVID-19. Certification and executive order. The disaster loan, as you can see, this walks you through each page. Now, if you are not currently applying, but you're looking for information, please reference back to this slide. The process is only daunting if you let it be. If you go through this with an open mind and understand why they're asking for this information, basically they are trying to get a better snapshot of how your business was affected by COVID-19 and what types of funds and time horizon you are needed for access to capital to help keep your business open, to make payroll and make bills. I know it seems like a lot, but please, as you go through, complete each section fully. If you have questions, reference the slide that I asked you to take a picture of earlier, which has our direct contact information, or the 1-800 number. There are multiple ways and resources for you to get through this process and to make sure you're applying correctly online. If there's something you're not sure of, please let us know, and we'll do the best we can to answer the question, because we want to help you get this entered as quickly as possible, obviously, because that will start the clock on your turnaround, your decision time to get funds released once approved. So as we go through, next slide, completing the 5C, the sole proprietor. Remember, we switched over from Form 5 to 5C. We're still talking about sole proprietor loan application portion on this slide. You fill in the information in the blocks and hit next, same as the other one. As we go through, that's what the next page on 5C, damaged property information, looks like for the sole proprietor portion. And then debits and assets, just like on your regular application Form 5, 5C also has an area for debits and asset information to be entered. So as we continue, there's a consent and additional comments. Obviously, your consent, read the consent, make sure you read everything before you click and move on to next, and then add additional comments as necessary, clarifying any additional information needed. So as we continue, still talking about the Form 5C, affiliated businesses. If there is an affiliated business, please complete the information below in this section. And moving on to IRS Form 4506T. As you can see, the green check mark here lets you know the disaster homes, the sole proprietor loan application portion was completed. When you click next, it moved on to the next section where it says request for transcript of tax return. As you can see, it's asking for Mr. Wesley Jones' personal taxes and the business taxes. Obviously, Mr. Jones is the owner of that business, so he will have to submit his personal tax information as well as the tax information for JWJ Builders in this section. Once you get through both of those sections, if it does apply to you, you will then go to the area where you accept the truthful information certification and then submit application. Request for transcripts of tax returns, you will fill this out, click and sign here for your request of the tax returns for Mr. John W. Jones in this example. As we move on, you would do the same thing for the business, and then request for upload or download of request of transcript of tax return. As you can see, it even says, please save your data by clicking Save button shown in the upper right-hand corner. It still shows you the progress where you are in the current application and lets you know what forms they are looking for to be uploaded here. And this is the tax return for John Wesley Jones. The other section would be for his company. Filing requirements, once the tax returns are completed, sign the final truthful information state. They're still, again, making sure that everything is truthful to the best of your ability. And as you can see, we have green check marks again. Mr. Jones, check mark under his tax transcript of tax return, and same thing for his company, JWJ Builders. As you can see, you certify and it has been saved, and you will go on to the next section to submit application. This is where you want to make sure you do have a green box or a green check in each one of the boxes. As you can see, they now say update, 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 and then you can go to previous or submit application. So the application submission confirmation page, here is another reference of the application number that was assigned to you and then now has been successfully submitted. As you see in your message center, you have another message. If you're finished, you can log out of the application. Logging out of the application will clear your activity from your browser's memory. This is especially important if you're using a shared or public computer. Make sure that it has completed submission and that you have saved. I would recommend printing this out, saving a copy of this page, or taking a picture of it so you have that reference information. In the message center, as mentioned before, you had a number 1 saying that you have another message in your inbox, so you'll want to click on that. And then subject, SBA application number, subject confirmation. From there, you can go back to the home page after completing your application, and it should return you there automatically. And from there, you can check the status of your application by checking the status icon. As you can see, as we look at the status, the current application status is received and in review. It does give you a time and date stamp on that, so you do know when that was received. And there's a special note, if you'd like to receive a message like this one below, to press save so you don't lose that information. As they always say, save and save often during the application process to make sure everything is saved, and then you will have that box where I showed you. Each green check mark will come up in the section to make sure it has been completed. At this time, this concludes the overview portion and also the step-by-step on some of the application pages you will see as you apply to the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan process. I know we will have some questions, so at this time I will turn it over to Joyce for questions that have come up during the presentation thus far.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua. Now, for all the participants, the panel on the right side of your screen has handouts, and both of these presentations have been uploaded, so you ought to be able to pull them off. If you have any problems, you can email me at info@heritageohio.org, and I can certainly send it to you. Also, all registrants will receive a copy of this a link to watch the recorded version of this presentation, and you can share it with others and things like that for free. So we have a lot of questions in already, and I'm just going to start asking them here. On SBA Form 5, page 1, question 3, it asks for the applicant's legal name. Should this be my business name or my name if I'm a sole proprietor?
So the applicant's legal name is the person's actual name itself. And then what we will do is on the further section, it will ask for all business information as well, to include any EIN associated with the business.
Okay, thank you. The next one on SBA Form 5, page 1, coverage type. I only have general liability, not any kind of insurance types listed. Should I still put in my insurance company in or leave it out?
Remember, try to make your application as complete as possible. If you do have some type of, it trailed off for a second, the type of coverage, but if you have something for coverage, I understand that most people don't have coverage for this type of loss, but if you are covered by an insurance carrier and it is asking for your insurance information, put that down. Remember, these will go through a processing, and you will have a processor call you once your application is complete. There was also a section if there was additional information where you needed to write in to utilize that section as well.
All right, the next question. On SBA Form 5, page 1, line 15, regarding the estimated loss, it is grayed out and will not yet let me put anything in there. Why?
Because right now they are, like I said, you will be contacted by someone after you put this all out, because the time horizon is uncertain. So you wouldn't know your exact estimated loss depending on the time horizon. So when you get contacted after your application is submitted, you will actually have someone working with you to figure out those estimates. Now, if you've already had some documentation or some figures that you have, keep that, because you will actually need to go over that when you're contacted after your application has been reviewed.
All right, the next question. I'm currently trying to complete the application. It's taking a long time for it to refresh between questions. Is there a better time to enter my applications?
We have forwarded this up as of today. We have understood that the system has gotten a great strain from a lot of people trying to apply today. So what I will say is maybe after hours, during normal business hours, we have put it on the radar of higher officials within SBA to let them know that this is one of the issues that you as small business owners are experiencing and hope to have that remedied. In the interim, what I would suggest is as time spaces out and you're able to complete some of your application and save it, is to possibly do it a little bit more this evening or in off-peak hours.
Okay, the next question. Can you expand on credit available elsewhere? Does a company need to completely exhaust their line of credit first?
No. So that is not just about line of credit. So if you have a business that has a line of credit, we don't expect all businesses to go and burn their line of credit to be able to apply to this. But if you have credit available elsewhere and secretively your spouse is a millionaire, or in other cases where you have an 850 credit score and you have, say, a couple $100,000 in different investments, that's what they're looking at is credit available elsewhere. If you're able to walk into the bank and you have an 850 loan, what we're trying to do is help small businesses in this time of need in response to COVID-19. And not everybody has, $2 million in the bank where they can just pull out from other savings and investments to cover this time. So this is for those that have that economic injury and need assistance making bills, payments for employees, for their leases and things related to their business. And when they say credit elsewhere, they're talking about those availability to go and get that type of money because you have such a high credit score, you have additional large amounts of funds available to you.
All right, the next question. It may be too early to say, but how long will these loans be available after the disaster? So can a nonprofit use other funds first and then find that it needs a loan later?
What we are telling people, and I did hear the one about the nonprofit, I do want to go back to the credit available elsewhere. Part of that, one thing I do want to point out for a point of clarification, unless you meet one of the very extreme examples that I gave out, where you have, millions of dollars in the bank or an 850 credit score, you won't know unless you apply. Now, if you fall into one of those very extreme examples I gave, obviously you should know you have a credit available elsewhere. But if you're not sure, we recommend from the SBA perspective, please apply because, again, once you get through the application process, it is going to allow you to speak to someone as they're going to help you figure out that time horizon and the amount that the business needs to borrow based on what you put in your application for expenses needed. Now, as far as the next question, when you're asking about moving forward. So a lot of this just came out, as you know, on Friday, the state of Ohio was listed as one of the disaster areas that were able to just go into the live system as of the end of last week. So we see this going forward for a while. We do not have an exact time. So if you apply to other programs and there's other things available to you as a nonprofit in that exact question, we don't know. I can't tell you how many months it'll be around for because we don't know how long this current situation as it relates to COVID-19 will be going on and will be affecting small businesses. Unfortunately, we just don't have that time frame. But if you think that you may need to use it, apply now because obviously if you get approved for a certain amount and you don't need to use it, it's a lot easier to give the money back or pay off early without penalty than to be scrambling to try to find access to funds.
Okay, the next question is, what if you're a business that opened in March of 2019 and don't have a history?
So if you opened last year, and when you say history, I might need to assume you mean as far as taxes. Now, if you prove that you have a lease or expenditures such as payroll, equipment that you have purchased or leasing as it relates to your business and can show your current profit and loss statement, that's what they'll look for. Obviously, you've been in business for about a year now. You may have not submitted taxes, but you should have documentation that you can submit in support that you have an economic damage as it relates to this COVID-19 situation and disaster. That is what they will look for. We do understand there are some businesses in that exact position where they have not filed taxes and they did come into business last year, but they have expenses as it still relates to their business.
What do you fill in for salary if you're a single owner?
Usually it's what you draw or pay yourself. That person, if they have issues as they're walking through, they have our email addresses on there and phone numbers. Please reach out to us. That one can be tricky, but as it relates to your taxes, you want to always reference what you said that you earned last year, or what you are currently taking as a draw or paying yourself as a single owner.
This is a similar question and make sure it has the same answer. What if you started the business in 2020 and have no tax returns?
Same thing, the exact same answer as the last one. If you do show, and I'll reiterate some of the high points, if you do show that you have expenses such as payroll. So if I started in January, but I have hired a staff or I have started a lease before COVID-19 became an issue, and I am paying on a space lease or equipment lease as it relates directly to that business, and it is a business expense, and I'm paying payroll for my staff that I've hired for this business, that is how you show. You would have to have a current P&L or a profit and loss statement for the business. Obviously, you don't have last year's tax returns because your business did not exist then, but you want to provide that detailed information so they can better assess what you are experiencing as far as economic injury and what type of capital you would require to keep your business in business during this time.
That's affected. I have two.
I'm sorry?
It's a person asking they have two businesses. Should they make two applications?
So if you have two separate businesses, here's the thing. With that, it also depends. We've had cases where people had two businesses in two separate counties. You then have to make two applications. Now, if they're under different EIN numbers, you would have to make separate applications. Now, if you're 100% owner on both businesses and they are a part of each other or connected, that is different. But if they are under a different EIN or a different county, you have to start a separate application. Now, one of the things that I want to point out in that type of instance is it's still a $2 million cap total. So it wouldn't be $2 million for each business. It would be total for that owner of those businesses. So if the two businesses are owned by the same person, that person that is applying for business one and business two, the cap is $2 million, not $2 million for each. It's $2 million total.
Okay. Whose tax returns, I think this is a nonprofit, whose tax returns do you supply during this process if your organization is owned by a board of directors?
If that person that asked that question for nonprofits are handled a little differently. If you can reach out to me directly and we can get an answer for you on that one. Myself, Jerome Jones, and David Townsend are the points of contact. You have our information. It was on the Columbus District Office slide. It was one of the handouts. If you can email us that specifically, we will get you an answer.
If you're taking a break, can you log out and be sure that the information you entered was saved? Can you pick up where you left off?
Please, please, please make sure your information is saved. You'll have to go back in and re-enter your application number. As you saw, it does let you save the information, but please make sure you have saved up to the point where you are. And if so, how you can check that is go back to previous page and make sure your information is there, hit save again, and then make sure that it still appears.
Is there something that describes what is considered an affiliated business?
As far as, I'm sorry, I'm going to need a little bit more information on that question. As far as a definition?
That's what the question says. Maybe she'll write in later and I'll be able to
Okay.
capture that. We'll see in a moment. Congress ever passes a Recovery Act?
I heard half of that question. I heard Recovery
Okay.
Act.
Will anything change if Congress ever passes a Recovery Act?
So right now, there are several things proposed up on the Hill. We cannot speak of what will change after that because it just depends on what is passed through. We do know certain bills are being worked on right now. And as we have more information, we are happy to link up with you again and to do follow-on trainings as we get more information on anything that is passed, and then we can update how it will affect the current programs that we have right now and what they'll look like if there are any changes moving forward with the passage of any new packages.
Okay, please ask me to repeat if I break up. I'm sorry. What is the turnaround time for approval, and when would the funds be available?
So the approval rates right now are ranging, and I do apologize, we do have to give a range right now because it is going to depend on volume, from 16 to 21 days to get a response on that. And from that time, it can be sooner, it can be longer, but that is why I'm giving everyone a range here on the call, because then it could take 5 days for processing and then 5 days for disbursement. So we are looking hopefully from anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, depending on the situation. And that is where making sure a complete application is important to cut down, mitigate, minimize, and totally wipe out any possible areas of delay where possible when you're submitting this application.
One of my small businesses is asking about credit checks. They only have to provide tax info. Is that correct?
They will look at the credit score as well. Tax information is asked, but as you provide Social Security and EIN and everything information there, they will actually, your credit will be looked at as well.
I think this question you've already answered. Have you heard any feedback that the website is extremely slow?
Yes, we did hear that today. We have pushed that up to higher levels within SBA. They are aware. We have a couple different areas where they are processing these online applications. In certain areas, we're experiencing a large volume, which was slowing the system. That has been pushed up. We are doing everything we can to try to help mitigate that time on those time delays.
For a nonprofit, do we need tax information for all directors of trustees or only paid staff?
So that goes back to the nonprofit. Unfortunately, usually we do not deal with the loans on the nonprofit side, but since this is a disaster, there is some more information that I will have to gather on that nonprofit for your tax return. So if in the same case of the other nonprofit when they were asking about the board of directors, if you can use one of those or all three of those points of contact, myself, David Townsend, or Jerome Jones, we will get an answer for that. Since this loan, the economic injury disaster loan, is eligible for nonprofits, we want to make sure we get that correct information out to all the nonprofits here.
The next one, I'm listening from New York. Will the process be the same?
So the online application process is what everyone is using. Now, you will still have to, from New York, you will still have to make sure your county is declared. I have not heard, I know New York and many parts is under lockdown, and a lot of things the governor is doing up there, which I believe they have applied to this. I don't know if New York did get approved for all counties. So I would suggest go to that live site on the left-hand round circle where it says checking areas, check the availability. Now, the application process is through Central SBA. So your application will look the same as everybody else is filling out as you go down the line. You just want to make sure your county is one of the approved counties listed as the disaster area.
Is it better to wait to apply since we don't know how long this will last? We need help now.
But to that person's question, if you need help now, it would not be prudent for you to wait. Obviously, when someone, as I mentioned before, calls you to reach out, they're going to help you work on the time horizon. Yes, that is correct. No one has a crystal ball, and we don't know how long this will last, unfortunately, but they're going to do the best they can with the information that you've submitted, as well as a conversation with you as the business owner, to put together a sufficient time horizon of what you need. So if you already need help now, please do not wait, because you then kind of increase your time delay on access to those funds. So please apply now and have all the information that the application asks, and have that conversation once they contact you after submission to develop a good strategy for your time horizon and amount needed.
If my business was already in the process of applying for an SBA loan to refinance debt and remove a partner, may we still apply for a disaster loan?
You can, but know that this is a separate type of loan. This is a disaster loan, so you won't be able to use any of this portion of the loan to buy out that partner. This would be a separate type of loan, and this is strictly for economic injury to keep your business going. So you can apply to both. You just will not be able to use this loan to pay off or buy out that partner.
What is the term of loan? And I heard that the rate could be reduced if we rehire most of the employees back when we reopen.
There are certain things that are, the rate is currently 3.75 until everything has come out. They are working, as I mentioned earlier, on new stimulus packages and new deals. However, once we get all the new information, I did offer the SBA, myself or one of my coworkers or colleagues in the district office can provide an update training, which will go over such changes as that, as what can be affected on rates and any changes as that goes forward. But as of right now, it's 3.75% for small businesses. And again, that is up to a 30-year term on repayment.
The next question. I am stuck on a page that keeps telling me I'm not using the right dollar format, so I cannot continue. What do I do?
Can you tell me what dollar format are you using? Are you using cents, or to what decimal? What I would try doing is changing it, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what to change it and try unless I know what dollar format you're using. Now remember one thing while they're getting that dollar format, 2.75% is the rate for nonprofits. Since I know we have some nonprofit businesses on the line, the rate for a small business is 3.75% interest rate, and for nonprofits, it's 2.75% interest rate.
If we are in Lucas County, which regional office do we contact with a question?
I'm sorry, I don't know where Lucas County is.
That's Toledo?
Oh, okay. So the Cleveland district office is up towards, they're actually in Cleveland.
Does an active line of credit disqualify a nonprofit from applying?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Does an active line of credit disqualify a nonprofit from applying?
That does not necessarily happen, no.
Can this loan be layered with other federal funds? Like if there are federal stimulus funds approved by Congress, or programs such as CDBG assistance for for-profit businesses, are there any duplications of benefits assistance concerns?
I think I heard most of that question. That person was asking if there was a reason for this to be offset.
Yeah, I guess asking how it commingles with other federal assistance.
So You can have other federal assistance with this loan. However, each individual situation could be very different. What we do recommend, especially if this is a for-profit business, make sure you apply because they will ask for other loans that you have and what your debts and things of that nature may be for that particular business. But remember, this is an economic disaster loan, which is very different than a lot of the other programs they've probably taken advantage of in the past, because this is very, very specific in response to COVID-19 and the hardships that businesses are undergoing right now. So just because you may have say a federal loan or using another federal program prior to COVID-19, that does not necessarily mean that you are not able to apply. We have several small businesses that have used SBA loans for different things, such as the 7A loan or the 504 loan, and they have been able to apply and get through on the EIDL loan process.
Okay, the next question is, what if my collateral is already fully pledged?
So one thing I will say, and that was in the slide, lack of collateral is not a reason for automatic decline. However, you want to list any additional collateral you may have, including equipment. So if your collateral previously was listed was your home, you want to look at that. And depending on where you're paid down, in some instances, they can look at second position on a piece of collateral, but this is a very specific case scenario. So that's where you want to make sure that you list everything in the application in its entirety. And then when you have the opportunity to speak with someone when they call after your application, then that's when you can have the conversation about collateral and if there's anything else. Because again, we are not looking to decline just for lack of collateral, but they will look to see if there is anything still available. But okay, that's above $25,000. I did want to stop myself. Remember, depending on the amount you're also looking for, some people are looking for a smaller amount just to keep payroll going and the lights on currently and may not need above the $25,000 amount. And, you know, every business, unfortunately, that is on this call is in a very different situation with some need a little more and some need less. So the person that asked that question, I would urge you to fill out and have that conversation. If it's something that you need in this time of need, fill out the application and start that conversation with them when they reach out to you.
I was going to say, I think some of these might end up being a little duplicate, but I think there's so much information. We want to make sure people are straight.
You have to, if we have additional questions, I have another webinar. I know we were scheduled to end at 3 o'clock, so we can take 2 more questions. And then we do have we do have the contact numbers for my colleagues in the Cleveland. I know some of you are calling in from Northern Ohio and, in fact, other states. So some of the individuals that are calling from other states, I please urge you, if you are in Kentucky, call the Kentucky district office. If you're in New York, call the district office there. If you actually just hit Google, and it's not one of the 2 district offices that I've listed on my slides here, which is Columbus and Cleveland, please Google the SBA district office in your area, because especially state to state, you want to make sure you're talking to someone in that SBA district office state, and certain states have availability for some different things. I know, say, for example, Florida is working with their state office on trying to provide other packages as well. So also find out what your state may be doing, not just the federal government.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so sorry that you have to go, but get going to the next one. For all of our participants, thank you very much for being on today. To let you know, we are going to have a Facebook Live event next week with Ohio merchants who are being creative during this crisis. So look at our Heritage Ohio's Facebook page for that. I'm sorry for the people who we didn't get to your questions. There are about 30 more questions. You have the contact information for SBA. If you weren't able to download the handouts, please info@heritageohio.org and I make sure you have them. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone, and please have a great afternoon. And if we can help in any other way, please reach out to the SBA in your local area. Thank you so much.